She heard the cry when no one else would stop. A white woman, a freezing infant, and a decision that will change not just her life, but the destiny of a feared warrior's son. Why was the baby left to die? And what happens when his father comes back? Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story and where you're watching from and why you're following this. Montana Territory, 1876. The bitter winter wind howled across the plains as Sarah Mitchell pulled her worn wool coat tighter around her slender frame. At 26, the schoolteacher had come west after losing her husband in the war between the states, seeking purpose in this harsh frontier town of Whispering Pines. "Miss Mitchell, you're a fool to venture out in this weather," Marshal Jenkins had warned her that morning. "The Sioux have been spotted near Clearwater Creek. After what happened at Little Bighorn, no white person is safe." But Sarah had promised to deliver medicine to old Mrs. Gunderson, whose rheumatism was acting up something fierce. "I'll be fine, Marshal. I know the safe paths." Now, as the snow began to fall more heavily, Sarah wondered if she'd made a grave mistake. Her horse, Penny, trudged slowly through the deepening snow, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The sound came so faintly at first that Sarah thought it was just the wind, but there it was again. A cry. A human cry. "Whoa, Penny," she whispered, pulling back on the reins. The horse stopped. Her ears pricked forward. Sarah dismounted, her boots sinking into the snow as she listened. There it was again, unmistakably a baby's cry coming from a small ravine just off the path. "Hello?" Sarah called out. "Is anyone there?" No answer came, but the baby's wail grew more insistent. Sarah tied Penny to a tree and carefully made her way down the slight incline. The snow had drifted against a fallen log, and there, partially covered by a thin animal hide, lay a small bundle. Sarah's heart pounded as she brushed away the snow. A baby, no more than a few months old, with copper skin and a shock of black hair, stared up at her with wide, tear-filled eyes. "Oh my Lord," she breathed. "Who would leave you out here?" Sarah looked around frantically. No footprints remained visible in the fresh snow. No sign of whoever had abandoned this child to the elements. "You poor little thing," she murmured, gathering the baby into her arms. His skin was cold to the touch, but he was alive and seemed uninjured. She unwrapped her own woolen scarf and swaddled him tightly, holding him close to share her warmth. The baby's cries subsided as Sarah climbed back up to where Penny waited. "We need to get you somewhere warm," she told the infant. With practiced movements, she mounted her horse while cradling the baby against her chest. As she turned Penny back toward town, Sarah felt a prickling sensation on the back of her neck, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. She scanned the tree line but saw nothing except shadows and falling snow. "Come on, Penny," she urged. "Let's hurry home." Unknown to Sarah, from the ridge above, Black Wolf watched through narrowed eyes. The feared Sioux warrior's face remained impassive, but his heart raged. His son, Star Watcher, was now in the hands of a white woman. He had placed the child there deliberately, a test to see if any white person would show compassion before he returned from hunting. "The spirits will decide," he whispered in his native tongue. "If she harms my son, her blood will nourish the earth before the next moon." Back in town, Sarah rushed into Doc Wilson's office, the bell above the door jangling wildly. "Doc, I need help," she called out, stomping snow from her boots. The elderly physician emerged from the back room, spectacles perched on the end of his nose. "Good heavens, Sarah. What are you doing out in this blizzard? And what's that you're holding?" "I found him abandoned in the snow," Sarah explained, unwrapping the bundle to reveal the baby. "He's a native child, Doc. Someone just left him out there to die." Doc Wilson's bushy eyebrows rose as he took the baby from Sarah's arms. "Let me take a look at him. Bring him back here by the stove." As the doctor examined the infant, Sarah paced nervously. "Will he be all right?" "He's cold and hungry, but strong," Doc Wilson replied. "He needs food and warmth, but I believe he'll recover fully. The question is, what are you planning to do with him?" Sarah hesitated only briefly. "I'll care for him, of course. At least until we can find his family." "That's a dangerous proposition, Sarah. If he's Sioux, and I believe he is by the look of him, his people might come looking. After Custer's defeat, tensions are higher than ever. I can't just hand him over to strangers, Doc. He needs proper care. Doc Wilson sighed, knowing that stubborn look in Sarah's eyes. Very well. I'll send word to the reservation agent tomorrow. Perhaps he can make inquiries. That night, Sarah sat in her small cabin attached to the schoolhouse, rocking the baby gently in her arms. She had fed him warm goat's milk from Mrs. Peterson's herd, bathed him, and dressed him in a small nightgown she had sewn for the church charity. "What am I going to call you?" she whispered. "Just until we find your family, you understand." The baby gazed up at her with solemn dark eyes that seemed too wise for his age. "I think I'll call you Benjamin," she decided, "after my father. He was a good, brave man, and you're a brave little boy, aren't you?" Outside, the snowstorm intensified, but Sarah felt an unexpected warmth in her heart as little Benjamin's tiny fingers wrapped around her thumb. She didn't know that at the edge of town, a shadow moved silently through the storm, watching and waiting. 3 days passed, and the blizzard finally released its grip on Whispering Pines. Sarah had not returned to her teaching duties, instead devoting herself to caring for little Benjamin. Word had spread quickly through the small settlement about the Indian baby Sarah had rescued, and opinions were sharply divided. "You're harboring an enemy," Jeremiah Blackwood, the general store owner, had told her bluntly when she came to purchase more milk and cloth for diapers. "That child belongs with his own kind." "He's not an enemy, Mr. Blackwood. He's an innocent baby," Sarah had replied, her chin raised defiantly. Others, like the widow Harriet Cooper, had been more supportive, bringing over a handmade blanket and a tiny wooden rattle. "Every child deserves kindness," Harriet had said, Indian or not. On the 4th morning, Sarah was awakened by a sharp knock at her door. Benjamin was still sleeping peacefully in the makeshift cradle she had fashioned from a drawer. She opened the door to find Marshal Jenkins and a tall man in a government suit standing on her doorstep. "Miss Mitchell," the marshal said, removing his hat. "This here is Mr. Evans from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. He's here about the child." "Good morning, Miss Mitchell," Evans said with a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I understand you've taken possession of a Sioux infant." Sarah bristled at his choice of words. "I rescued an abandoned baby, sir." "I didn't take possession of anything." "Nevertheless," Evans continued, "any Indian child found off reservation is to be remanded to government custody immediately. I've come to collect the boy and transfer him to the mission school at Fort Laramie." Sarah's heart sank. The mission schools had a reputation for harsh treatment of native children, forcing them to abandon their heritage, cut their hair, and adopt white customs. "He's far too young for a mission school," she protested. "He's just a baby. He needs individual care." "That's not for you to decide, Miss Mitchell," Evans replied coolly. "The law is quite clear on this matter." Marshal Jenkins shifted uncomfortably. "Now, Sarah, I know you've grown fond of the little feller, but Mr. Evans is right. There are proper channels for these things." At that moment, Benjamin began to cry. Sarah turned away from the door. "Excuse me, gentlemen. He needs me." She hurried to the cradle and lifted the baby, who immediately quieted in her arms. When she returned to the door, she found Evans had invited himself inside and was looking around her modest home with undisguised disdain. "I'm not giving him to you," Sarah said firmly. "At least not until I know he'll be properly cared for." Evans's expression hardened. "This isn't a negotiation, Miss Mitchell. Hand over the child now, or I'll be forced to report your obstruction to the territorial governor." "Give me 1 week," Sarah pleaded. "He's still recovering from exposure. Let me nurse him back to health, and then we can discuss his future placement." Before Evans could respond, Marshal Jenkins intervened. "Seems reasonable to me, Mr. Evans. 1 week won't make much difference, and the child does look to be in good hands here." Evans glared at them both, but finally nodded curtly. 1 week, Miss Mitchell. I'll return next Thursday, and I expect the child to be ready for transport. And don't get any ideas about disappearing. The penalty for kidnapping an Indian child is quite severe." After they left, Sarah held Benjamin tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I won't let them take you," she whispered. "I promise." Later that afternoon, as Sarah hung freshly washed diapers on a line behind her cabin, she felt that same prickling sensation at the back of her neck. Someone was watching her. She turned slowly, scanning the tree line, and froze. A tall Native American man stood at the edge of the clearing, his long black hair adorned with a single eagle feather. his face marked with red paint. Even from a distance, Sarah could see the intensity of his gaze. Her first instinct was to run inside and bolt the door, but something stopped her. Instead, she stood her ground, holding Benjamin protectively against her chest. "Hello," she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. "Can I help you?" The man took a step forward, then another. He wore buckskin leggings and a buffalo hide coat against the cold. At his waist was a knife, but his hands remained open at his sides. "The child," he said in surprisingly clear English. "He is mine." Sarah's arms tightened around Benjamin. You're his father?" "I am Black Wolf of the Hunk Papa Sioux. The boy is my son, Star Watcher." Sarah's mind raced. If this man truly was Benjamin's, no, Star Watcher's, father, why had the baby been abandoned in the snow? "Did you leave him in that ravine?" she asked, unable to keep the accusation from her voice. Black Wolf's expression didn't change. "It was a test. Our ways are not your ways. I watched to see if any white person would show mercy. Many passed by. They heard his cries. They did nothing." That's barbaric," Sarah exclaimed. "He could have died." "I was always near," Black Wolf replied calmly. "If none had stopped, I would have retrieved him. But you came. You showed kindness when others did not." Sarah didn't know what to say. The man before her was clearly dangerous. The set of his shoulders, the watchful eyes that missed nothing. Yet there was something else there too. A father's concern, perhaps. "He's been well cared for," she said finally. "I've been calling him Benjamin." Something flickered across Black Wolf's face. "You gave him a white name." "I didn't know his real name," Sarah explained hurriedly. "I didn't know if he had family. I only wanted to help him." Black Wolf took another step forward. He was close enough now that Sarah could see a scar running along his jawline. "May I see my son?" Sarah hesitated, then slowly turned the baby so his father could see him. Benjamin, Star Watcher, cooed and reached a tiny hand toward the tall warrior. "He knows his father's face," Black Wolf said softly. Will you take him now?" Sarah asked, a lump forming in her throat. As terrified as she had been of the government agent taking the baby away, this was different. This was his father. Black Wolf looked past her toward the town. "It is not safe. The Bluecoats hunt my people. The agent at the reservation seeks me. If I take him now, we will both be in danger." "There was a man here this morning," Sarah said, "from the Indian Bureau. He wants to take Star Watcher to a mission school." Black Wolf's expression darkened. "The schools where they kill the Indian to save the man. My son will not go to such a place." "They're coming back in a week," Sarah said, making a sudden decision. "If you truly are his father, I'll help you. But you have to promise me he won't be put in danger again." Black Wolf studied her for a long moment. "Why would you help us? We are enemies to your people." Sarah looked down at the baby in her arms. "He's not my enemy. He's a child who deserves to be with his family." She raised her eyes to meet Black Wolf's gaze. "But I need to know he'll be safe." "You have my word," Black Wolf said solemnly. "I will return in 3 days, when the moon is dark. Be ready." Before Sarah could ask any more questions, he had melted back into the forest, leaving her standing alone with the baby, wondering if she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Sarah spent the next day in a state of nervous anticipation. She jumped at every sound, expecting either Black Wolf to reappear or Evans to return early with reinforcements. She had made a promise to help a man who, by all accounts, was an enemy of her people. A Sioux warrior who had likely fought against Custer's men at Little Bighorn. Yet when she looked at Little Star Watcher's innocent face, she knew she couldn't bear to see him torn from his heritage and placed in an institution. "You've gotten yourself into quite a predicament, Sarah Mitchell," she muttered to herself as she prepared a simple stew for dinner. A knock at the door made her heart leap into her throat. She quickly placed Star Watcher in his makeshift cradle and straightened her apron before answering. "Evening, Sarah," Reverend Thomas said, removing his hat. The elderly preacher had been a friend to Sarah since her arrival in Whispering Pines. "Thought I might check on you and the little one." "Reverend, please come in," Sarah said, relieved it wasn't Evans. "Would you like some stew? I've just made it." "Don't mind if I do," he replied, stomping snow from his boots before entering. "Mighty cold out there tonight." As Sarah served him a bowl, the Reverend peered into the cradle. So this is the child everyone's talking about. Handsome little fellow. His name is Benjamin, Sarah said, then hesitated. At least that's what I've been calling him. Reverend Thomas took a spoonful of stew, regarding her thoughtfully. I heard Evans from the bureau was here yesterday. Sarah sat down across from him, her own bowl untouched. He wants to send him to a mission school at Fort Laramie. I know those schools, the Reverend said with a frown. While I believe in bringing Christian teachings to the Indian tribes, I cannot approve of their methods. Children need love, not just discipline. Sarah took a deep breath, then decided to trust the old minister. Reverend, what if I told you his father came to see me? The spoon paused halfway to the Reverend's mouth. His father? An Indian? A Sioux warrior named Black Wolf. He says the baby is his son, Star Watcher. The Reverend set down his spoon. Black Wolf. Sarah, do you know who that is? Sarah shook her head. He's one of the warriors who fought alongside Sitting Bull at Little Bighorn. The army's been hunting him for months. They say he's killed dozens of settlers. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Oh God. Did he threaten you? The Reverend asked urgently. No, nothing like that. He was calm. He explained that he had left the baby as a test, to see if any white person would show compassion. That doesn't sound like the bloodthirsty savage the newspapers describe, the Reverend mused. What does he want now? He wants his son back, but he says it's too dangerous right now. He's coming in 2 days to take him away. Reverend Thomas leaned back in his chair. And you're planning to help him? It wasn't a question, but Sarah nodded. I can't let that baby go to a mission school where they'll try to erase who he is. If Black Wolf is truly his father, you're risking a great deal, Sarah. If you're caught aiding a wanted man, a Sioux warrior no less, the consequences would be severe. I know, Sarah whispered, but when I look at that baby, I don't see an enemy. I see a child who deserves to be with his family. The Reverend was silent for a long moment, then reached across the table to pat her hand. Your heart has always been your guide, Sarah. It's what makes you such a fine teacher. But please, be careful. After the Reverend left, Sarah sat by the cradle watching Star Watcher sleep. What am I going to do? She whispered. The next morning brought another unexpected visitor. Marshal Jenkins stood at her door, his expression grave. Sarah, we need to talk, he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. There's word that Black Wolf has been spotted in the area. Sarah tried to look surprised. The Sioux warrior? The very same. Army scouts found signs of him just a few miles from town. The marshal glanced at the baby. There's some who think he might be after the child. Why would they think that? Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Rumor has it the baby might be his. Evans is coming back today, not next week. He's convinced the child isn't safe here. Sarah's heart sank. Today? But he promised me a week. I'm sorry, Sarah. The decision's been made. Evans will be here by noon with an escort to take the baby to Fort Laramie immediately. After the marshal left, Sarah moved with frantic energy. Black Wolf wasn't due until tomorrow night, but Evans would be here in a few hours. She had to get Star Watcher away before then. She packed a small bag with baby supplies and some of her own essentials. Then she wrote a quick note to her friend Harriet, asking her to look after the school in her absence. She couldn't tell the whole truth, but she explained that she needed to ensure the baby's safety. Just as she was finishing her preparations, she heard horses approaching. Looking out the window, she saw Evans riding up with 2 soldiers. They were early. Sarah's mind raced. There was a root cellar beneath the cabin, accessible through a trapdoor in the pantry. It wasn't much, but it might buy her some time. Quickly, she gathered Star Watcher and her bag and descended into the cellar, pulling the trapdoor shut just as a knock sounded at the front door. Miss Mitchell, open up! This is official government business. Evans's voice carried through the floorboards. Sarah held Star Watcher close, praying he wouldn't cry. The baby seemed to sense her tension, his dark eyes wide but silent. Above, she heard the door being forced open, then footsteps moving through the cabin. She's gone, one of the soldiers said. Took the Indian kid with her by the looks of it. Damn it, Evans cursed. Search the premises, they can't have gotten far. Sarah's heart pounded as footsteps moved directly overhead. A floorboard creaked just above the trapdoor. She held her breath. Nothing here, sir, the soldier reported. Should we check the school building? Yes, and alert Marshal Jenkins. I want riders sent out in all directions. That woman has no idea what she's gotten herself into. After what seemed like an eternity, the footsteps receded, and Sarah heard the front door slam. She waited a few more minutes before cautiously pushing open the trap door and peering out. The cabin was empty, but she knew she couldn't stay. It would be the first place they'd check when they returned. Gathering her courage, Sarah wrapped Star Watcher warmly and slipped out the back door. The sun was high overhead, making it difficult to move undetected, but the trees behind her cabin offered some cover. She had just reached the tree line when she heard a soft voice. "White teacher." Sarah spun around to find Black Wolf standing there, as if he had materialized from the forest itself. "Black Wolf, I thought you weren't coming until tomorrow night." "I sensed danger," he said simply. "The spirit spoke to me of urgency. Evans came back early," Sarah explained quickly. "He wants to take Star Watcher now." Black Wolf nodded. "Then we must go. My people have a camp 3 days' ride from here. Star Watcher will be safe there." "We?" Sarah asked, surprised. "You cannot return," Black Wolf said. "They will arrest you for helping me. You must come with us at least until it is safe." Before Sarah could respond, shouts came from the direction of the town. The search party had realized she was gone. "Decide now," Black Wolf said intently. "Stay and face their justice, or come with me and see my son safely home." Sarah took one last look at the cabin that had been her home for the past 2 years, then turned back to Black Wolf. "Lead the way," she said. As they disappeared into the forest, Sarah couldn't help but wonder if she had just thrown away everything she had worked for. But when Star Watcher gripped her finger with his tiny hand, she knew she had made the only choice she could live with. 3 days of hard travel brought Sarah, Black Wolf, and little Star Watcher to a secluded valley nestled between 2 mountains. Sarah had never ridden so far or so fast in her life. They had traveled mostly at night, resting during daylight hours in hidden places that Black Wolf seemed to know instinctively. He had provided a horse for her. Where he had obtained it, she didn't ask, and had shown surprising patience with her inexperienced riding. As they crested a ridge, Sarah gasped at the sight below. A small encampment of perhaps 20 teepees stood along a winding creek, smoke rising from cooking fires into the clear morning air. "Your people," she said softly. "Will they accept me?" Black Wolf's expression remained impassive. "They will accept my decision. You saved my son when others would not. That earns you respect." As they rode into camp, Sarah felt dozens of eyes upon her. Women paused in their work, children stopped their play, and warriors reached instinctively for weapons. Black Wolf raised his hand in a gesture of peace, speaking rapid Lakota to those who approached. An elderly woman with deeply lined features stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the bundle in Sarah's arms. Black Wolf dismounted and helped Sarah down from her horse before addressing the old woman with evident respect. "This is Singing Bird, my mother," he explained to Sarah. "She has waited many days for the return of her grandson." Sarah hesitated, then gently handed Star Watcher to his grandmother. The old woman's weathered face transformed as she gazed upon her grandson, her eyes filling with tears of joy. "Washte, washte," she murmured, rocking the baby. "Good, good." A young woman pushed through the gathering crowd, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. She stared at Sarah with undisguised hostility before turning to Black Wolf. "You bring a white woman to our hidden place?" she demanded in English. "Have you lost your mind, husband?" Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "Husband?" Black Wolf was married. "Prairie Flower," Black Wolf said calmly. "This woman saved our son when no other white person would. She risked everything to bring him safely to us. She deserves our gratitude, not our anger." Prairie Flower's gaze shifted to her son, now contentedly nestled in his grandmother's arms. Her expression softened slightly, but the suspicion remained when she looked back at Sarah. "Why would a white teacher risk so much for an Indian child?" she asked bluntly. Sarah met her gaze steadily. "Because he deserved to be with his family. Because it was the right thing to do." For several tense moments, Prairie Flower studied her, then gave a curt nod. "You will stay in my mother's teepee until the council decides what to do with you." That evening, as Sarah sat awkwardly in the teepee belonging to Prairie Flower's mother running deer, She wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. The old woman had been kind enough, showing her where to sleep and offering her a bowl of stew, but they couldn't communicate beyond simple gestures. The flap of the teepee opened, and Black Wolf entered. He sat across from her, the fire between them casting shadows across his face. "The council has met," he said. "You may stay until the first thaw, when the passes are clear. Then you must decide. Return to your people or remain with us." "Remain?" Sarah asked, surprised. "Would that be allowed?" "It is unusual, but not without precedent. There have been white women who have joined the people. It is not an easy life." "And what of your wife? Prairie Flower clearly doesn't want me here." "She is protective of our son and our people," Black Wolf explained. "We have lost much to the white man's hunger for land and gold, but she is not unreasonable. She knows what you did for Star Watcher." Sarah stared into the fire. "I don't know what to do. I can't go back to Whispering Pines. They'll arrest me for helping you. You could go east, start a new life in another town." "Perhaps," Sarah said quietly. "I need time to think." The next morning, Sarah awoke to find Prairie Flower sitting beside her, Star Watcher in her arms. "He is hungry," the young mother said simply. Sarah sat up, confused. "I'm sorry, I don't understand. I wish to feed my son, but he cries when I hold him. He has grown used to you." There was no accusation in her voice now, only a mother's concern. "Oh," Sarah said, understanding dawning. "He just needs time to recognize you. May I show you something that might help?" Prairie Flower nodded cautiously. Sarah moved closer, careful not to intrude on the other woman's space. "When I first found him, he was frightened. I would hold him like this, close to my heart, and hum softly. The rhythm reminded him of being inside his mother." She demonstrated with a small cushion, then motioned for Prairie Flower to try with Star Watcher. The baby fussed at first, but as his mother held him against her heart and began to hum a Lakota melody, he gradually calmed. "See?" Sarah smiled. "He knows his mother." For the first time, Prairie Flower's lips curved into a small smile. "Thank you," she said simply. Over the next few weeks, an unlikely friendship began to form between the two women. Prairie Flower taught Sarah the basics of Lakota life, how to prepare hides, cook traditional foods, and care for the horses. In return, Sarah shared stories of her life in the East and taught Prairie Flower more English. Star Watcher grew stronger each day, now fully bonded with his parents but still lighting up whenever Sarah came to visit. Black Wolf remained somewhat distant, though Sarah occasionally caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. One evening, as winter began to loosen its grip on the mountains, Black Wolf found Sarah sitting alone by the creek. "You have decided," he said, not a question but a statement. Sarah nodded. "I can't go back to my old life. There's nothing for me there now." "And you believe there is something for you here, among the people your government is trying to destroy?" "I believe in doing what's right," Sarah replied. "What's happening to your people is wrong. If I stay, perhaps I can teach the children English, help them understand the white man's ways so they can better protect themselves. It will not be easy," Black Wolf warned. "Some will never trust you completely. I know, but I've found something here I never had before. Purpose, and perhaps in time, acceptance." Black Wolf sat beside her. "Prairie Flower told me what you did, how you helped her bond with Star Watcher. She has asked me to tell you that you are welcome in our family." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you." The next day, news arrived that changed everything. A scout returned to camp with word that soldiers were searching the mountains, led by a guide who claimed to know the location of Black Wolf's camp. "We must move immediately," Black Wolf announced to the gathered tribe. "Pack only what you can carry. We leave at nightfall." As the camp bustled with activity, Sarah helped Prairie Flower prepare for the journey. Star Watcher watched from a cradleboard, his dark eyes curious. "Where will we go?" Sarah asked. "North," Prairie Flower replied. "To join Sitting Bull's people in the land the white men call Canada. The British Queen's soldiers do not hunt us there." That evening, as the tribe prepared to depart, a shot rang out from the ridge above the camp. A rider on a white horse appeared, silhouetted against the setting sun. "It's Evans!" Sarah gasped in horror. "How did he find us?" More riders appeared behind him, their uniforms marking them as cavalry. Black Wolf grabbed his rifle. Take Star Watcher and the women to the caves, he ordered. We will hold them off. Sarah took the baby from Prairie Flower. No, wait, let me try to talk to them. Evans is here for me and Star Watcher. Maybe I can convince him to leave your people alone. It is too dangerous, Black Wolf argued. They will not listen. Please, Sarah insisted. Let me try. Too much blood has been shed already. After a moment of tense silence, Black Wolf nodded. Be careful, White Teacher. Not all of your kind share your heart. Sarah handed Star Watcher back to Prairie Flower and walked slowly up the path toward the ridge, her hands raised to show she was unarmed. As she approached, Evans urged his horse forward to meet her. Miss Mitchell, he called, his voice carrying in the still evening air. I see you've thrown your lot in with savages. A disappointing choice for an educated woman. Mr. Evans, Sarah replied, striving to keep her voice calm. I'm here of my own free will. The child is with his parents where he belongs. There's no need for violence. Evans sneered. That's not for you to decide. I have orders to retrieve both you and the Indian child, and to capture the renegade Black Wolf. Step aside. I can't do that, Sarah said firmly. These people have done nothing wrong. They're just trying to live in peace. Peace? Evans laughed bitterly. After Little Bighorn? You're more naive than I thought. At that moment, Reverend Thomas emerged from behind the soldiers, his expression grave. Sarah, thank God you're alive. Reverend, what are you doing here? I convinced Mr. Evans to let me come along. I thought I might be able to help negotiate a peaceful resolution. Evans scowled. There's nothing to negotiate. These Indians are in violation of treaty obligations. They're to return to the reservation immediately or face the consequences. The Reverend turned to Evans. Sir, I remind you that your orders were to retrieve Miss Mitchell and the child, not to engage in battle with peaceful Indians. Peaceful? Evans scoffed. Black Wolf is a wanted man. A man defending his family and his way of life. Sarah countered. Please, Mr. Evans, there's a better way to resolve this. As they argued, Sarah noticed movement behind the soldiers. Black Wolf and several warriors had circled around and now positioned themselves on the higher ground behind Evans and his men. They could easily ambush the soldiers, but instead, they simply waited, watching. Reverend Thomas noticed her gaze and turned to see the warriors. Mr. Evans, he said quietly, I believe we may be at something of a tactical disadvantage. Evans twisted in his saddle, his face paling as he realized their position. This changes nothing, he blustered, though with less conviction. It changes everything, Sarah said. You're outnumbered, Mr. Evans, but no one needs to die today. Go back to Fort Laramie, report that you couldn't find us. In time, this will all be forgotten. And what about you? Evans demanded. You expect me to just leave an American citizen with these savages? I choose to stay, Sarah said firmly. This is my home now. After a tense standoff, Evans finally relented. Fine. Stay with your Indians, Miss Mitchell, but don't come crying to the army when you regret this decision. As the soldiers retreated, Reverend Thomas lingered. Are you certain about this, Sarah? She nodded. More certain than I've ever been about anything. I've found a purpose here, Reverend. I'm going to teach the children, help bridge the gap between our worlds in whatever small way I can. The old minister smiled sadly. Then God be with you, my dear. You always did have the strongest moral compass of anyone I know. As Sarah walked back to the camp, she saw Prairie Flower waiting with Star Watcher in her arms. Black Wolf stood beside them, his face unreadable as always. They're leaving, Sarah announced. At least for now. Black Wolf nodded. You spoke well. Few white women would have such courage. We should still move camp, Prairie Flower suggested. They may return with more soldiers. Yes, Black Wolf agreed. We will go north as planned. Sarah, you are still certain you wish to come with us. The journey will be long and difficult. Sarah looked at the small family before her. Black Wolf, proud and strong. Prairie Flower, fierce in her protection of her son. And little Star Watcher, whose innocent life had brought them all together. Then she glanced back at the departing soldiers, the last vestiges of her old life. I'm certain, she said with a smile. My place is here now, with all of you. As the tribe departed that night, traveling under the cover of darkness toward a new beginning in the north, Sarah Mitchell, once a schoolteacher from Boston, rode alongside the family that had unexpectedly become her own. Star Watcher, securely fastened in his cradleboard on his mother's back, reached out a tiny hand toward Sarah as they rode side by side. "He knows you will always be part of his life," Prairie Flower said softly. The woman who heard his cry when others would not. Sarah smiled, her heart full. In saving this child, she had found not just a purpose but a home and a family. The road ahead would not be easy, but as the stars shone bright in the clear night sky, she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be.